do you know when will you know what decision on the eviction?
Well, I was approached while I was outside to say that they're not going to agree to the new eviction policy. That there's no eviction for bedroom tax. I'm not going to agree to that. That's what they basically said to me. But they have come up with something that there was going to discuss, but they couldn't tell me what it was. But I might like it a little bit, not as much as what's been proposed. But we should all find out on Monday in Bolton in the news.
Just try to on tonight. No, we got two Labour
councillors. Well, ask Guy. Can you give us a bit of an update?
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, go on.
To say, given what Linda's just said, and Bolton had opened recently acquired Andover Council property before, can we ask two councillors to make that simple commitment in the council chamber that they don't want to see any evictions?
Well, nobody wants to see anybody evicted.
Right, we can make that simple commitment because that has happened in other authorities, and I think if you've made that, you might encourage Bolton at home to be a bit more responsive instead of this obscure.
Guy, I think you have passed a motion in council.
We passed two motions in council, saying that we're opposed to it. Obviously, it's, there are a number of things that strike me. Perhaps the most important is well, there's about half a dozen that are really, really bad. First of all, it's retrospective, because as you quite rightly say, Chair, when people signed up to a tenancy, it was subject to them paying the rent, a home for life. My wife was brought up on Haleth Wood, and when we got married, her mother at the time, she's now older, so she wouldn't be affected because she's over 60, but at the time, she was under 60, her 4 children had grown up, they'd all left home, and she was in exactly the position that she would have been in exactly that position. She had grandchildren who came to stay over, but she had a 3-bedroom house, and there was just her and her husband, who then sadly died. So she was a widow, living in a 3-bedroom house, under 60, if you will. Therefore, she would have been in exactly that position. So I know from my own family circumstances. And it wasn't. And she'd been, the thing that annoys me, another thing about it, she'd been there since during the war when her husband was in the RAF. And she got that council house when he was serving in the armed forces. He worked all his life, but she would have been in that situation of having to brought up 4 children, wanting to have grandchildren coming to stay, except not wanting to leave the community because she'd lived there since the 40s. So it's wrong. The other thing is, it's a home. I think that's the central thing. As you quite rightly stress, it's not bricks and mortar, it's somebody's home. She brought up 4 children in that house. And it had a lot of memories for her. And eventually, she's now 93. But she's moved into old folks accommodation. She still keeps her own front door, but that was her choice. That was her choice when it got to the stage where a 3-bedroom house was unmanageable. She was about late 80s when she moved, and she just couldn't manage as an 80-odd-year-old woman a 3-bedroom house. So it's retrospective. You know, you've signed a deal that they've reneged on. You've signed up to a house and they've not. The other thing that strikes me, it's fundamental. There's a fundamental division in housing policy in this country between people like myself who are fortunate and fortunate enough to have your own house. I've never paid a penny in my housing all my life, because the capital appreciation you make on a private property outweighs the mortgage payment you make. So I've never ever, if I were to add up every pound I've paid in mortgages over the last 30 years and subtract it from the capital value of my house, they've been paying me money to live there. And that's fundamental. That's a fundamental distinction between my mother-in-law, who paid a rent from 1940 odd, and still pays a rent, by the way, still pays rent in the old folks' sheltered accommodation, and owner-occupiers who are subsidised by the system. It's fundamentally unfair.